I've got the pleasure here to introduce Greg, our keynote speaker, and Greg and I just met actually off stage here an hour ago, and I was joking that there are so many different bios on you, Greg, on the internet, and so what that means is that you're a baller, like you're legit. If you can find that many different stories about you, but let me see if I can do it some justice here. Here's how I'm going to introduce Greg to you all. Greg Hopf is the owner of Moccasin Trails, an award-winning educational tourism business that is deeply rooted in sharing Indigenous cultures. Born and raised in the Northwest Territories, Greg's Indigenous culture and background is his identity. Greg will be discussing how our connection and relationship to Mother Earth is dictated by the values we hold and the moral compass we set. Greg has presented at many conferences on Indigenous issues around the world, as well as inspirational topics around Indigenous business development, partnerships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous organizations, youth empowerment, revitalization of Indigenous cultures, and much more. Greg currently resides in West Kelowna with his wife, Sharon, and 2 children, Keaton and Presley. So, Greg, welcome. Pleasure to have you. Over to you. Can't wait to hear what you have to share.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I do have a special treat here. I've got my brother, my business partner with Moccasin Trails, my best friend, my family member, Kupki Chief Frank Antoine from the Bonaparte First Nations. So him and I are actually in Calgary here on Treaty 7 territory, doing presentations for the Alberta Indigenous Summit, Tourism Summit. First of all, I want to, and you'll hear from Frank as well. Frank, you'll hear from Chief Antoine. He's got a lot of wise words and more than me. So, but I do want to recognize. I looked in. I was really quickly looking at who our audience is tonight, and I see that we have a special member in our audience, and that's Chief Derrickson from the West Bank First Nations. And I just want to recognize him. I live on West Bank First Nations territory in West Kelowna, and everything that I do, I always try my best to follow protocol. Protocol in our culture is so important. It's really like law. Non-Indigenous have their law books and their court of law. We have protocol. It's just as equivalent. So I must recognize Chief Derrickson tonight as well. So thank you so much. I think what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about my journey and my relationship with Mother Earth, and then my brother here can talk as well his relationship, and then we'll combine it. I was born and raised in the Northwest Territories. I was born into a single mom at that time. It was really tough. I don't want to get too emotional, but she is your classic residential school survivor. The government and the churches succeeded in what they set out to do with her, and that is take the Indian out of the child. She is ashamed to be Indigenous. She didn't have the ability to be a mother. Actually, that's not true. She had the ability to be a mother, but it was stolen from her. And so that was my upbringing. My 2 older brothers stepped in. One was 10 years old and the other was 11 years old. And they basically made sure that, my bottle was warmed up with Inflac milk, that my diaper was changed while my mom was battling a disease that she still battles today. She was a very absent mother. I don't have a relationship with my mother that you typically would, like a mother and son. There's a lot of years where I had a lot of anger towards her, but it's not her fault. It is not her fault. I keep telling myself that. So what happened was basically the saying goes, it takes a community to raise a child. My grandparents stepped in, my mom's mom and dad. My grandfather was a hunter and trapper. And so my childhood very early was being with him on the trap line, minus 30, minus 40 below weather, starting the skidoo, jumping on the sleigh and checking our traps. And it was like 6 in the morning till like 7, 8 o'clock at night. And it was mink and marten and coyote and wolf and fox. And he would take those furs and he would sell them to the Hudson's Bay. And that was how he sustained our family. My grandmother was a midwife, so watching babies being born in our little log house, I mean little, fetching water, getting cold water for the mom to be, boiling water, getting warm water, getting towels, wetting towels, cleaning up blood, watching babies being born in our living room. That was my childhood. So it was very cultural, it was very spiritual. When I got to the age where I was getting a little older and my grandparents were getting a little older, my mom at this time was kind of sporadically coming in and out of my life and take me for a weekend and then give me back to my grandparents or whatever. My Aunt Celine then stepped up and said, okay, I'm going to take Greg now. And I think I was around maybe 11, 12, 13. And she took me, and I was raised in a very small community called Fort Simpson. In our language, we call it Clédécoin, which is where two powerful rivers come together. And this is where I really learned. As a teenager, it's very tough. And so it was, my teenage years was filled with sweat lodges, ceremonies, learning more about my great-grandparents, learning about my bloodline, about the people that I come from. And it was hunting. I harvested my first moose by the time I was 12 years old. And that was my rite of passage into adulthood. My uncle showed me that. And he showed me the relationship that we have with Mother Earth, and my aunt as well. Mother Earth gives us everything. We respect her, we feed her, we honor her. When I shot my first moose, right, and I still do it to this day whenever I harvest, is you take a second and you make an offering to the animal, and you thank that animal for giving himself up so I can feed my family. I still do that today. Any animal that I harvest, I still do it. I've been in herds of caribou herds of hundreds and thousands of caribou. It's crazy. I'm on my skidoo and there's caribou all around me for as far as my eye can see. If I wanted to, I could have shot 50 caribou. But the way I was taught, the way I was brought up, was that these caribou and Mother Earth has given themselves to me, or are giving themselves to me, and I just take what I need. So I would, harvest 3 or 4 caribou, and that would get me through the winter for my family. I would leave the rest for my family. A good analogy is that one of the chiefs in our communities used to always say, Mother Earth is like a fridge. You open up the fridge door, you take what you need, and you close the fridge and you leave everything else for the rest of your family. I'll never forget that. And that's how I live today. It is those lessons that hunting and harvesting on the land, the plants, the animals. It is still that relationship that I have with Mother Earth that I basically do my daily decisions on. Right now, this whole panic buying thing in the Okanagan, it really breaks my heart. I was at a grocery store about a couple weeks ago, and there's not much milk and whatever. I go to the store and I go to another store, and yeah, there's a bunch of milk there, but I'm not going to sit there and take 8 or 10 milk. I'm going to sit and take 1 or 2 at the most and leave the rest for my family. And I think that's why, I was brought up in that sort of culture. So it affects my shopping habits. It affects my buying habits. So I thank you so much. I think what I'll do is I'll hand it over to my brother, Chief Frank Antoine from one of our First Nations as well. You can say his relationship with Mother Earth.
Thank you. Skwenda Elia Muta Stukama'a. Those are the first words I heard when I was 3 years old. And those words means come over here, sit down, and shut up. How I remember that was telling my mom that once, and when I was about 5 or 6, I didn't realize what I was saying to my mom. Those were words that were ingrained into me by my grandmother that never spoke a word of English. We were raised by my mom's mom. And it was something that it was sleeping in me. And the language has always been sleeping in me. And when I got that opportunity to get on the land, is through my dad and my grandpa and the rest of my grandpa's generation. I was lucky to be led and taught what was on the land through a series of different teachings. One was ranching and cowboying. The other was just indigenous teachings that I thought everybody knew growing up as a child. It was just a natural thing for us to learn and for me to learn. When you're around people that protect you, that take care of you, that support you no matter what you're doing in life, that was something I've never felt more safe in my life. It was easy for me to get up and talk amongst those men because I never felt judged, never felt like I had to prove myself to anybody. And then, that was back in the mid 70s, early 80s. And then for me to learn the culture and to see the culture crash when all these men become alcoholics or what they called winos. It was really hard for me to watch that with my own eyes, to see these men and strong men become so weak with such an addiction. And that was my upbringing as a young man. And there were two worlds I was living in. I was living in culture and I was living in devastation. And I didn't understand why these men went and did what they did. I didn't know what residential school was. I didn't know any of that. That was never brought up. But we definitely lived through it through intergenerational trauma without knowing. As we got older, we started to understand it. But it's something I really follow through now, and I really now support anybody that's survivor in that era. And we're lucky to still have them because they have something to share with us and to pass on to Canada. And that's to tell the true story about how Indigenous people were treated back when they started to try to negotiate their lands, try to negotiate a fair deal with the government, and put in a position where we had no choice, losing everything that we had, taking everything we have. And now we're starting to learn to be that next level of being a leader. And that's not only with culture, but also with the economic opportunities that are coming down the pipeline, whether it's through our natural resources. And, I look at West Bank as a huge opportunity of what they're doing there and what they're growing. And they're definitely front leaders on everything when it comes to economic development. And it's really important to build those relationships, what they're doing with Kelowna. And it's important that we get to see and watch that. And there's, as other communities like myself as a leader in my community, we are now starting to take those steps to move forward. So our people are, taken care of, like what Greg was saying. We only take what we need. And we're starting to find that balance. We're starting to bring that culture back into our world, into our lives, everyday lives. And I'm just fortunate to have, and Greg and I have that opportunity to have a lifestyle that we still use today in the culture. And now we're moving forward in the economic side of it. And it's important that we find that balance because we want our children to learn both sides because they're walking in two worlds now. And to be successful and to learn from one another, we're a multicultural country now, and we're starting to work with anybody and everybody. And it's important, there's a word that we always use in our language, which is called kanukuntua, working together. And it's important that we use that word as a regular thing. There's many meanings behind it, which is very unique for our, is not unique for English, it's unique, but for our own language, we know that there's more than one meaning when we say our words and our tongue. And it's important that we continue those words because that carries on that relationship we had with the land and with the animals. And it's important that we continue that journey for our next generation.
And I know with, every Indigenous person has a special relationship with Mother Earth on their upbringing, on what they were showed as a kid. Mine was around that deep respect, and that Mother Earth is a life, and she will give everything you ever need in your whole life. She will give it to you. You want housing, she'll give you a house. You're cold, you want clothes, she'll give you clothes. You're hungry, you want food, she'll give you food. You're cold, you want a fire, she'll give you fire. Everything we have, everything we need in our life comes from Mother Earth. And I think, what really kind of, I guess, gets to me every time or eats at me is, and I can relate to this very much, is in the Northwest Territories, we are known for a few things. Number one is our Aurora Borealis. Beautiful, by the way, if you ever guys get a chance to get up there. But mining, diamond mining, the NWT, the little territory of the Northwest Territories, contributes 25% of the world's diamonds right now. That's crazy. So now you're digging this big, big hole, you're damming up rivers, you're putting dikes in to hold water back. Why? So a girl can have something on her finger? It's not what I was brought up for. And Frank touched on it, is that right now we're at this point where Mother Earth is starting to lash out, and she's getting upset. And you know what? She's saying, you guys aren't doing a good job here. You guys aren't treating me very good. So you know what? I'm going to show you. I'm going to give you a lesson. And in our culture, in Indigenous culture, and again, the thing with Indigenous is we are so diverse, right? But some of us believe that Mother Earth, if we don't treat her well, she's going to let us know who's boss. And Frank talked about it even when the forest fires, and that's cleansing.
And that's to us, and when we dealt with the fires in 27 called the Elephant Fire in our community, in our territory, it was us, when we looked at that, it was basically Mother Earth telling us, I'm taking back what you can't take care of. So she took all the trees, she took all the animals, to move them all away. And to us, though, we don't look at that as a punishment, we look at that as a rebirth of what's going to be coming next for the next generations, not maybe my children, my grandchildren, maybe my great-grandchildren may get that opportunity to see that rebirth happen again. But then again, we got to do our part, making sure that we're doing the right things. You look at the fires that we went through again this year in our territory. Again, it happened all around us. You look at the floods that are happening now. We're no longer waiting for summer or spring. Now it's happening during winter. So again, our seasons, our climates are getting crossed over. Thinking of the child, going trick-or-treating, in October, and it's, we have a foot of snow. Now you don't see snow until maybe after Christmas or around Christmas. It's very rare. Like, our climate change is so horrific of how unbalanced our Mother Earth is. It's starting to become a washing machine. It's starting to become a turmoil where we don't know if we're upside down, sideways, looking forward or backward. It's one of those things that we have to start praying and start doing our part of taking care of our natural resources. Like Greg says, we can't be extracting what's there. We have to try to start preserving. And we're doing that in my community now. We're starting to do that old growth tree cutting now, where we're not going in there and doing clear cuts. We're now taking selective logging. We're starting to do the best practices, because that's something that we need to start preserving for our children. We need to start mitigating our forest by taking all the fuel that's below the trees. That starts the forest fires, not what's on top. So we're learning how to do our own gardening out in our own land now, versus just like building a garden. We take care of the little things, and now we got to start doing it in a bigger phase. Our watersheds, everything like that is being affected. Our water system, everything. We got to start learning how to start protecting it versus taking it. And it's starting. I feel our next leadership that we're doing, that's what we're working towards, is protect what's out there for our next generation.
we practice our respect for Mother Earth, our offerings to her in everything we do. Frank and I own a tourism business, and when we take people out on the land, one of the very first things we do with our guests and our visitors is we take a second. We take a second and we feed Mother Earth, and we do it with tobacco or sage, and our guests take part in this because they need to understand that Mother Earth is a living thing. It's not something you can just trample on and live on. She breathes, she gives us life, she takes it away. So we need to honor that, and we need to pay respects to that, and we need to feed that. So before we start any tour, we do a feeding of Mother Earth's, exercise ceremony, whatever you want to call it. And you should see our guests and our visitors. It really transforms them because they didn't look at Earth like that before they had an experience with Moccasin Trails. They just said, well, that's the land. I can do whatever I want. I can buy that piece of land and I own it. I can do whatever I want to this land. No, you can't. So we start off everything with, they grab some tobacco, they go, and it's basically saying, thank you. Thank you, Mother Earth, for everything that I have in my life. Thank you for my home that you've given me. Thank you for everything that I have comes from you. So it's getting our guests and visitors to really get in that mode of what we've grown up in and what we've lived, and that's the connection to her. Everything that we do is connected. And so we really, really emphasize that with our guests, is to have that, let's look through this tour through an Indigenous lens, how we grew up. And it really, really transforms them. And a lot of people, they actually just, even in that little thing, some of them will even break down and they'll start crying. And they're like, I've never done this before. I've never viewed Mother Earth as a thing. I just thought it was just a land that I have my house on. So, you know what, tonight, we're not going to sit here and say, you should do this, you should do that, you should do that, and we're all good. No, what we're here to do is to show you some examples of how we were grown up in the environment, of how important Mother Earth was toward what is for us to this day. And that she is a life, and we have to respect her and we have to love her, just like how I love my children and my family. It's the same sort of relationship that I have with my wife and my kids that I have to have with Mother Earth. And that's kind of really what we wanted to share with you guys tonight, just some examples of that relationship. And hopefully you can now move forward with a different understanding, with a different outlook, a different opinion of our land, of Mother Earth as well.
I guess for me, no matter where you travel, we always go on vacations, no matter if it's Hawaii or Mexico. We want to learn about our other cultures, but we're so diverse in BC that you have it right in front of your doorstep, that you want to learn, especially even in Kelowna, Kamloops, Prince George, down the coast. We are so unique as far as First Nations peoples. We all have similar, to me, protocols that we follow, but mostly it's that spirituality that we carry, that physical, that mental. All of those entwined, to me, is something that we live. It's a lifestyle that we live. It's part of our DNA. It's not that we have to go learn it. It's part of, again, like I said, those words I first said to you at the beginning was something that was just put into me through my grandmother. And it wasn't something that she told me I had to learn. It was something that was just a part of who I am. And I never forget that. I'll never forget those first words in my life. And they'll probably be the last words I'll probably use. And I will always remember my ancestors before me. Like I said, it's important that we carry on those traditions that we know, even though if it's just one word, if it's just that one time going hunting, whatever it is, that first time experience that you have, you'll never forget it. And that's so important that we instill that every day into our children, because, you know, we're getting to that world where our children now, look what we're doing now with the technology. We never thought we'll ever be living into a world like this when you were back in 1980s, 1990s. We never thought we'd be living the world we're living in today with the technology. There's some very big advantage with technology, and there's a lot of disadvantage, because you detach yourself when you're not out there on the land. You can get a picture, you can get a video, you can get a drone, show the country, show the land, but then when you get out on the land, it's a totally different feeling. And sometimes we need to disconnect to reconnect. And that's something that I really believe in, and that's something me and Greg do, and we want to get back to our grassroots and to build that foundation. That's something that we really make sure that we do, and we do it together as our families, or we do it together as just brothers on the land. But mostly it's sharing that, and that's kind of what our business does. We educate, but we really want to share as much as we can with the guests, but also to educate the locals that are with us and who want to work with us today, especially after the 215 this year and the residential school findings of the children. It's important that we remember them, because that could be our family members laying in that gravesite. So again, it brings back that reality that, you know, how does Canada really treat us? And we have to get back to that, of building that relationship and that trust again, that, you know, that started prior to the residential school era.
So in closing, I just want to challenge you all. And that is that whenever you're walking, whenever you're going for a hike, or whenever you're out in nature, whether you're walking by Okanagan Lake or Lake Okanagan, or you're walking up in Rose Valley hiking, or Mount Fox, or wherever you are, grab a tree, touch that tree, take a moment, say thank you. And if you want, you can do your own offering. You can bring some tobacco, you can pick some sage, it's all around. Just take a second, feed Mother Earth. And that's your moment. That's your internal moment to quietly just thank her. Thank her for everything she has given you in your life. Thank you for everything you have in your life today. Every single one of you, everything you have in your life today is because of Mother Earth. And so have you paid her lately? Have you stopped and just thanked her? So I challenge you all to do that. Next time you're out there, next time you're out on the line, just take a second. Take a second and just say thank you. Thank you, Mother Earth, for everything that I have in my life. You will start getting it. You'll start understanding how important she is. So with that, Frank and I thank you so much. Yeah, we're very honored to be here tonight. And again, I just want to emphasize that, like I said in the opening, that this is a big deal, because events like this in the past would happen without the Indigenous voice. And I always say, how can you talk about sustainability or climate change and not include the Indigenous voice? So thank you to the leadership of Accelerate Okanagan for including us and giving us the voice, and you guys listening to our voice and our message tonight, because we think it's a pretty powerful message, and it's a very important message. And so again, thank you so much. Citron.
Thank you, Greg and Frank. You know, stay on screen. My job as an MC, an MC's job often is to, play back what we heard. And so, I mean, this was so authentic, for one. And I took so many takeaways, and I thought I had them all. And then Frank, you threw me another one. But let me summarize some of the things I heard for everybody. Number one is that, and this one hit home for me, is that we often travel to experience culture. And yet there is this rich culture right here in our province, in our country, that we probably don't know as much as we should, and we should. You talked about how your guests are transformed when they go on your tours. And I can only sit here and sort of imagine, like, what if we all heard the Indigenous story? What if we all knew how the Indigenous people lived? Would we have the challenges we have today? I don't think so. And so when I took away I always try to work in threes. Unfortunately, you guys maybe take four, but my three big takeaways. Number one is only take what you need. That could be in the context of your fridge, the grocery store, the land. Honor Mother Earth as a living being and have a relationship with her. Third was work together. And the fourth one was say thank you. Say thank you to the tree. Say thank you to the ground. Say thank you to the earth. And so those are my big takeaways. And I guess as a sort of a sum, Greg and Frank, I think one of the things I admire the most of the Indigenous community is their ability to storytell. And so that's power. We talked about it even in our pitches, that if you can tell a story, you can compel people to want to take on this idea of yours. This is what the Indigenous community does better than anyone, in my opinion. We need to hear these stories. We got to embrace the storytelling. And so thank you again for taking this time to share your authentic story with us. And I really hope that people took as much away as I did.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And the last thing, if people want more information, I'm sure you guys will share it with everyone. It's just moccasintrails.com. We have a LinkedIn page. We have an Instagram page. We have a Facebook page. Yeah, so just give us a follow. Reach out to us anyhow, any way you can. And we always love sharing. We always love working one-on-one with people. And so if anyone here that is listening wants to chat further with Frank and myself, we're always open to that. We always welcome that.
What an amazing offer. And maybe that's the one takeaway everyone can have is let's continue this conversation and reach out. Greg and Frank, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Have a wonderful time in Calgary.
Thank you so much.
All right.